Welcome back. So in this episode, I'm going to be talking about Garret Foster, or as I refer to it, taking the red pill with Garret Foster. I'm sure a lot of people have heard about him. It was a few weeks ago. Unfortunately, there was I think some protests going on, or slash rioting, and a vehicle got swarmed. Of one of which there was a person wielding a weapon, and that person ended up getting shot, being Garret Foster. So the reason I want to talk about it is just because the responses I've seen, how I describe them are unfortunate. It's one of those things where I know that this won't necessarily be a popular statement, but frankly, I do think that his actions were foolish. I think that with everything going on, with just everything we're seeing in the news and people being attacked in their cars and such, the person in the car, I could completely empathize and understand that they would be in fear of their life, and they see somebody and they see a ton of people around their car swarming it. I've seen videos of people getting that happening and them being torn out of their vehicle and then beaten within an inch of their lives. So the fact that that was all going around this person, and then one of the people outside their vehicle was wielding a weapon, I imagine was terrifying. And so I believe that the actions of the person in the vehicle were justifiable and were simply an act of self-defense in fear of their life. That being said, the reason I'm making this is just because of the representation I've seen with that statement, with those positions, is I've seen a lot of disrespect towards Garret Foster, and more importantly, towards his family. And by that I mean, that his family, his fiance and his friends are the ones who are seeing all these headlines. You can criticize someone's actions, but I do think we need to tread softly when we're talking about somebody who's passed away, whether or not they brought it upon themselves. We can talk about the facts, we can talk about the action, but I think that the dialogue that we use and the attitude we use it is extremely important, because, like I said, is the only person that you're hurting are his family. If someone does something stupid and they lived, to see another day, and then you can be a little more critical. Then you don't necessarily have to be as soft spoken, because again, you're not stepping on a man's grave. You're not diminishing his life, whether or not he was foolish or not. And so I just wish that when people were talking about it, they would do so with that in mind. The fact that it's not as though when you're critiquing or criticizing his actions that he's sitting there back at home seeing your statements and realizing, yeah, that was pretty stupid of me. It's the only people hearing that are his loved ones. And for myself, that's one of the things again that resonates with me, is that I had so many people after my twin was killed telling me about his death, about how it meant nothing. I had there was actually, and I don't know if a lot of people remember this, but so back when Heath Ledger, the actor, passed away, there were some extremists, Southern Baptist Church, that had said that they were going to protest his funeral because he had made the movie Brokeback Mountain. And and so I just remember cringing at that hate. Well, that same Southern Baptist Church actually said that they were going to protest my twin brother's funeral, because they said that God had killed him because he was fighting an unjust war. So, I can extremely empathize with the hate that people fling at you. I remember years after my twin brother's death, I was reading an article about my brother's company, but about his squad that was killed. And under the comments, there were a lot of nasty, hateful things that people were saying, not directly naming my twin, but talking about his death and doing so in such a hateful, ignorant way. And so I know how it feels to have somebody just completely remove the most impacted people of this death aside, and not care about their pain. And I'm trying to prevent myself from using foul language, because it's very difficult when you're talking about something so personal, not to simply respond emotionally. But yeah, so that's something I felt compelled to talk about with Garret Foster is his fiance, his family, his friends. I think that we need to be soft spoken when we're talking about his acts, because again, you can point out again, the perspective of the person that was in the car. You can talk about his actions and how he may have done that differently, but I've seen people talking about this and just laughing about what happened to him, and laughing and calling him names and such, and it just makes me sad, because again, those words aren't going to the person that made the foolish acts. They're going to his loved ones who are justifiably mourning. And I'd say the same thing with some other incidences. There have been incidences where shootings have taken place with the police, and you can argue, how they should have responded. They weren't. There have been several that weren't nearly victimizing as the George Floyd murder. That I think anybody and everybody agrees was a murder. But there's more where incidences where individuals shot at the police and then got shot, and then the family members of that the shooting that got killed by the police were outraged and so forth, and it made me upset because, frankly, I don't think that I don't think the news anchors should have been interviewing this guy. This kid should have been getting empathy and sympathy and love, because regardless of whether or not his brother should have made those actions, it's completely understandable for him to be in this world of pain. And so again, it makes me sad because there's so many times where this happens, where people have no problem, throwing their insensitive remarks because they judge the actions of another, but they don't realize that those words aren't being only heard by the foolish. They're being heard by the loved ones, by the people who did nothing to deserve losing this loved one. So it's really important for people to realize that. And I feel like a lot of the times that's because people are making rash comments about people, about shooting victims like Garret Foster, who did acted improperly. A lot of times because they get attacked, because somebody will call them out for being insensitive and so forth. Well, because they're on the defensive because they get attacked, they start justifying why they said what they said rather than reflecting. So again, it's just, I understand both sides. I understand why people are frustrated with the actions of people who are getting themselves killed. But at the same hand, we need to be empathizing for their families and loved ones, so that we can learn and so we can come together. Because again, death is death, and it's still sad, regardless of the actions of the person who may or may not have brought it upon themselves. And so it's important to realize that and just be aware of the impact you can have. Because again, I don't feel like most people in these negative interactions mean anything by it. I don't think that they're seeking out malice acts. I don't think they're trying to belittle people's pain and such. But like I said, the problem with that action is that you're going to be more apt to continue that behavior because you have to justify why you have that perspective. And if you don't continue that behavior, you're subconsciously condemning it. And again, that's just one of the patterns I've seen with myself and with other people. Is a lot of the times when they have misbehavior, it usually gets worse and worse and worse slowly over time. Because, like I said, a lot of times people don't want to feel that pressure of guilt of messing up. I didn't do anything wrong. And so they go in the cycle of justifying it. Well, the problem with that, like I said, is that once you start justifying negative actions, your actions continue to be negative, which means you just have to justify it more. And so again, it's just this horrible vicious cycle. And again, we just need to go back to what's stemming it. And like I said, a lot of times it's just more the lack of tact people use when they're talking about sad situations, like people getting shot, whether or not it was justified or not. And so, like I said, I think there's a way to talk about it without being a jerk, without being insensitive, without adding to the fire. But like I said, it's just important to point out what could have been done differently, but to do so in a compassionate, understanding way. I don't think that Garret Foster meant any harm. I've heard people speculate that he shot first or he rose his weapon, and I'm like, one, I mean, that's hearsay. That's unless you're a witness, unless you have physical evidence. Again, it's just something where you can speculate, but it's important to identify that that's what you're doing. But again, even whether or not he did provoke any type of intimidation with his weapon, intentionally or unintentionally, again, we just need to evaluate what we could do differently so that these incidences don't take place. And if they do take place, again, we need to evaluate how we're reacting and how we can speak our truth without stepping on the pain of others or doing so very brashly. Like I said, that's the most disgusting thing. When I've seen people, make fun of his, I saw in a video, I saw some type of memorial for him. And I saw a YouTuber that, and typically, and I think that that's one of the things that if we're going to make jokes, because I do have a dark sense of humor, but again, if we're going to make jokes, I think it's important to make jokes about things that aren't personal, or if they are personal, certainly not people who have passed. I don't think it's funny. I think the only person that you probably can make fun of would be a guy who had a really nasty, horrible mustache that was just right here. I'm not sure if I can say his name, but anyhow, yeah. So I would have no problem making fun of that dude, and him passing. But other than that, it's just one of those things where I just think it's in bad taste. And a lot of times, people, like I said, they feel compelled to defend people, to defend the innocent. And then again, it's just this back and forth that just continues. And a lot of times it's just, if we were a little more soft spoken, if we were a little more compassionate to the loved ones of these people that have passed, I think a lot less emotions would be in play, a lot less heated arguments. And again, because again, there was an incident. I was driving home. This was months and months ago, and I was on this faster road. I say I live in Montana, so the roads out here are considerably faster. And I saw this. And there was a bunch of vehicles coming in. I couldn't turn. I was sitting at this turn. It seemed like forever. It was probably about 13 seconds. But anyhow, so I saw this vehicle coming, and I didn't feel like I could get out in front of them. But I was just so frustrated, and I just picked my kids up from school or something like that. So and again, I think that there was some sort of delay at school. So anyhow, so my emotions had been worked up. I was just impatient already. And I saw my opportunity and I took it. And I didn't cut this person off, but I certainly couldn't have gotten up to speed, and I knew it when I pulled out in front of her. And I felt really bad. I felt like, geez, man, that's the type of person that pisses me off. I'm doing the very act that, and the irony is that as I was driving home, I couldn't tell if this person was following me or what. What ends up being that this person literally lived across the street from me in the house that I had moved in a couple months prior. And so I felt like such a heel. And so again, like I'm saying, the first thing I did when I got all my kids inside was I started cycling what happened. And I cycled, the fact that when I was speeding up, this person made no effort at all to slow down a little bit, and it was just right on my butt and blah, blah, blah. And so I started justifying why I misbehaved rather than just saying, hey, it was a jerky thing. I just own up to it. So I think it was after 10 minutes of self-reflecting and trying to justify why I did what I did, why she should have been. I just was like, I'm going to get my kids settled. Then I walked across the street and knocked on her door to apologize. And she didn't answer. And I imagine it's because she thought I might be a weirdo or freak out or whatever. So I went back home and I wrote a note apologizing to her, just saying, I'm sorry. And I'm trying to remember if it was around the holidays or something, but I remember making some reference to that. I hope that this didn't diminish your holidays. I apologize. I was being impatient. I just wanted to let you know that I regret doing, cutting you off or whatever. And so, and it felt so freeing, honestly. And that's kind of what I'm trying to say with everyone is it's so freeing to try to be the bigger person. I know the temptation of giving into your emotions and having that eye for an eye mentality and having that, just defending your position at all costs. But again, I think that the problem with that is that when you're going to defend your position at all costs, it's a constant battle. Every day you're going to have to wake up and put on those combat boots and get to it. Whereas if you can have this harmony of life where you have a position, you have feelings, but you're not going to be, you're not going to give into your emotions. You're just going to stick to your position and your point. Like I said, he shouldn't have approached the car that was getting mobbed with a weapon. Just point in case. That's all. You can point out. Just shouldn't have done it. Was, I don't. Like I said, I don't think he meant anything. You watch somebody and you can usually get a good idea of their mental state. And he was actually being interviewed minutes before the shooting. And he didn't seem like a guy that was on the edge of snapping and was just going to go postal. So again, I think it was just this fact that he thought that he was being the symbol of standing up for his own position, and so forth. But the sad fact, like I said, was that people aren't going to see you how you are. They're going to see you how they've been influenced. And so if they've been seeing videos of people getting mobbed in their cars and being torn out of their cars, getting beaten, that's going to be in their head, whether or not that's the intent of the mob, of the crowd, of the individual with the weapon. So it's just really important to identify these issues, but do so in just a very compassionate and understanding manner, and just realize that he wasn't a horrible human being. He just made a poor decision. And again, too, even if he was this horrible human, even if he had brought this on, which I don't believe he did, When you're speaking these hateful, judgmental words, just think of the people who are hearing it. It's not him; it's his family. And so, yes, it's just really important to tread softly because, that was I can't remember. I think I read it in one of the YouTube channels, or not channels, but episodes I had. It's my favorite quote, and I'm paraphrasing it. It's something along the lines of, "But I, being poor, have only my dreams. I have spread my dreams beneath your feet. Tread softly, because you tread on my dreams." And so I believe Yeats is the poet, but anyhow, it just reminds me of that. It reminds me of I just want to tell people to tread softly because, like I said, a lot of times I feel like people don't mean neglect. They don't mean to be stepping on somebody else's grave, but a lot of times, it does happen. And so, a lot of times too, when somebody, a loved one, when somebody who a loved one to that person's grave you're stepping on, sees it, a lot of times they respond emotionally and understandably. And so they're going to blast you. But again, too, because you didn't mean it, you're going to go in this cycle of defending yourself rather than just being able to own up to it. And I think, like I said, it's a big part of it is just that we need to try to do our part to de-escalate all these arguments, to de-escalate the emotions. And I know it's a very hard task, but like I said, I think that a lot of it too, I think that the issues that we're looking at with the country are a lot like a marriage in that you need to not do this eye for an eye mentality. If you're going to be petty, I'm going to be petty. It just needs to be, you trying to focus on you being as calm as you can as many times as you can. You're never going to get it 100% right. You're never going to get it perfect. But, to really just look at it like, what can I do to help the situation? And I think the more and more we do that, the more and more we're going to see, the civil unrest calm down. We're going to see us becoming united again. But it's important to look at the whys of why we get so emotional and what's feeding this division rather than simply identifying that we are divided. But as always, good luck and good night.